has a family conflict. So the first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Do we want to start? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item on the agenda, we started, Dan? I'm sorry. Are we recording?
Yep, we are streaming on YouTube.
Perfect, thank you. The next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. We have three. It's the minutes from the regular Board of Education meeting on the 14th of November of this year. Are there any changes that anyone would like to point out? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from November 14th, 2022?
Move that the Weston Board of Education approve the November 14th, 2022 Board of Education meeting minutes.
Great. Is there a second?
A second.
Second, Peter Gordon. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. That passes. The second set of meeting minutes are from the meeting we had on November 28th, 2022. Are there any proposed changes to those minutes? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve the minutes from the November 28th, 2022 meeting?
Move that the Weston Board of Education approve the November 28th, 2022 Board of Education meeting minutes.
Terrific. Thank you. Is there a second?
A second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, and let's move on to the third. The third is to approve the meeting minutes from the December 5th, 2022 meeting, special meeting of the Weston Board of Education. Any changes to the December 5th minutes? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve?
Move that the Weston Board of Education approve the December 5th, 2022 Board of Education meeting minutes.
Terrific. Thank you. Is there a second?
A second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The minutes for the December 5th meeting are approved as presented. The next item on the agenda is a Student Board of Education representative comments. Emma or anyone?
Hi.
Hi.
So obviously we're winding down for winter break and midterms are coming up, but we have a few club run things happening in the school. So today we had Christmas carols going around the classrooms, and on Friday we'll have candy cane grams, which are messages people can send to each other that also raise money for a charity. And a couple clubs in the school are also running a toy drive before the holiday season.
And then in addition to that, we have like a little, almost like a mini spirit week going on with a couple of like fun thematic dress ups. We have a special event that we do in the high school each year called the X period, where students basically have a free period where they do something of their choosing. It can range from like sports tournaments through like holiday sing-alongs to community service activities, depending on what students want to do. And then besides that, to kick off our winter sports season, Emma and I recently organized a pep rally to try to get people excited for the upcoming sports seasons. It went pretty well. And then besides that, I guess, winter sports have started. That means girls basketball, boys basketball, and then I think girls and boys indoor track. I'm not sure about the other ones, but those are the main ones that most of our students play, and hopefully we do well. That's basically about it going on in the high school.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much, and have a great holiday and get ready for the midterms. The next item on the agenda is public comment. Dan, are you controlling this?
Sure. So anybody who's currently connected to the Zoom meeting who would like to be a part of the public comment. If you look at the bottom of the Zoom client that you're connected to this meeting with, there's a little icon that says raise hand. So if you could go ahead and click on raise hand, and then June will announce your name, and she will promote you to a panelist, where you will get a pop-up saying you're being asked to join as a panelist. You click OK, it'll reconnect, and then you just unmute yourselves because you come into the meeting muted. You unmute yourselves, you start your video, and you can go ahead with your public comment. So June, if we want to give it just a couple of moments to see if anybody has any public comment.
Dan, I don't see a raised hand, do you?
Nope, I do not. Does not look
Okay.
like anybody who's raised their hand for public comment.
Okay.
Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is new business. Lisa, do you want to take the first item, or Tina?
I'll take the first item. Thank you very much. The first item is the consent agenda that Ms. Kavanaugh, our Human Resources Director, put together. Retirements. We do have one announced retirement. It is with a little bit of reluctance, and I'm sure Patty Fauber is very sad about this. Our beloved school counselor at Weston Intermediate School, Vicki DeLuca, after almost 20 years of service to the district, has announced that she will be retiring in June. Vicki will be greatly missed. I can't imagine not walking into the intermediate school and not seeing Vicki. And I see Patty's face that she is going to miss her too, as is Ms. Edwards. She was part of the pupil services team, but we certainly wish her a wonderful, well-earned retirement. We do have two resignations. One resignation is Alyssa Bejan. I'm sorry. She is a teacher at Weston Intermediate School, and she will be taking a position in another district starting January 6th. The second position is Karen Olson, who is the administrative assistant at central office to the director of pupil services. Karen resigned as of December 9th. And we anticipate announcing two new hires at our January meeting to fill these positions. Thank you.
Thanks. Are there any questions from the board? Seeing none, let's move on to pupil personnel services and special education.
We need to get a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Is there a motion to approve the
Yeah.
that the board accepts the consent agenda as presented? David, would you like to make a motion?
Yeah. Move that the Weston Board of Education accept the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
A second.
All those in favor?
Hi, Bernadette.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, now we can move on to pupil personnel services and special education update. Hi, Tracy.
Sure. Good evening. Nice to see all of you. As you all know, and as we've been discussing, staffing continues to be a challenge in PPS special education. That being said, we have certainly added several wonderful new additions to our team this past year. And as Lisa alluded to in the previous update, we are interviewing very aggressively for each of our open positions. I can tell you that other districts are struggling with similar challenges, as are the contracted agencies that we work with when we are having difficulty. We or any other district are having difficulty filling positions with district employees. We are absolutely using agencies, contracted agencies, when we can. I'm certainly mindful of the impact of the turnover that we are experiencing. And we will continue to share positive news in this area when we have it. To that end, speaking of contracted services, we have had movement in our PT position through outside contracted services, and I am hopefully putting the finishing touches on a plan for BCBA support as well. In terms of other updates, we had another successful parent meeting in November. This session was actually hosted by our elementary assistant director, Patty Morrow. She stepped through updates pertaining to CT SEDS, our new IEP system, and also reviewed new dyslexia guidelines for the state of Connecticut, and provided some information about professional development that we're providing to both general and special education teachers in the area of reading. Another parent meeting is being planned probably for the end of January at this point. And as with previous parent meetings, we'll communicate that through the district email. So keep an eye out for that. And then finally, there's been communication with families about the ELC lottery, which is fully in place right now. The lottery began, I think it was on December 5th. It extends through the middle of January, and that's when we actually start selecting names for our classes. We've been answering parent questions about our program and certainly look forward to our ongoing work with families to highlight all of the great work that's happening in that program. So that's my update for tonight.
Thanks, Tracy. Questions from the board? Great. Thank you, Tracy. The next item on the agenda is a discussion and a vote on the approval for an overnight field trip to the Boston Heritage Festival in April of this coming year.
Good evening,
Yes,
everyone.
yeah, at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Henkel, who will take over the field trip part of the meeting. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Happy holidays. The next two items on the agenda are reflective of two overnight field trips for your approval. They have both been presented by the teachers who have coordinated the trips, Liz Morris and Dan Passarelli. The first overnight field trip is a one-day field trip. This is extended by the music department, and this is a yearly tradition of the music ensemble performance and adjudication. They participate in the World Strides Boston Heritage Festival in April. And this trip is offered to 104 students and is determined by each ensemble's need for balance and instrumentation as the performances will be adjudicated. They will attend some various experiences, not only just within the ensemble, and they will also attend a Broadway show, and as well as the Heritage Festival performances. That is the first overnight field trip on the docket for this evening for approval.
Are there questions from the board on the Boston field trip? Would someone like to make a motion to approve the trip? David?
Move that the Weston Board of Education approve overnight field trip to Boston Heritage Festival 2023 on April 21st and April 22nd, 2023.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Great. All those in favor?
Right.
Aye. Any opposed? Great. Tina, you want to move on to the next?
Yes, thank you. The second overnight field trip on the docket is for 9 days to various international locations, including Venice, Italy, Prague, the Czech Republic, Vienna, Salzburg, Austria. This trip is extended and coordinated by Dan Passarelli to students at the high school. They will attend and visit various landmarks that extend and enhance our current social studies curriculum, as well as some historical and cultural and arts connections as well. The full itinerary is located in the agenda this evening prior to approval this evening.
Questions? None? Would someone like to make a motion to approve the overnight field trip to Europe from April 6th to April 15th of this coming year?
Move that the Weston Board of Education approve an overnight field trip to Europe, April 6th to April 15th, 2023.
A second?
Aye.
Thanks, Chad. All those in favor of the Weston Education approving, Weston Board of Weston Education approving an overnight field trip to Europe from April 6th to April 15th, 2023? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, that passes. Thank you. This is the first read of the Weston Board of Education policies, regulations, and bylaws. Is there any discussion from the administration or questions from the board?
Usually I go through each policy.
Okay.
Melissa is the chairperson of this committee, and
Right.
As we know, she's not available, but we have a bunch of policies that we have a group that are the first read tonight, and we have a group that are the second read. So I'll just kind of take you through the first read. Basically, it's for discussion purposes. If anyone has any questions about any of these policies, just to note, I really appreciate Vice Chair Melissa Walker's efforts to move the policy committee forward. You know, we get updates from Shipman and Goodman that we should be looking at different state regulations. And so we certainly want to keep our policies up to date. So the separation of church and state, salute to the flag and the Star Spangled Banner, just a couple of highlights. If you look very careful at the policy, it talks about how we approach religion for an objective curriculum related perspective. It talks about, participating in constitutionally protected prayer, which is, something that can occur by law. It talks about the Pledge of Allegiance, which we do in every school every day, and students do have the right to choose not to recite it. One of the changes that we made with the wording specifically is under the observance of religious holidays. Before, the policy specifically specified the first day of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And what we have done now is to make the policy talk about that when schools will be closed on holidays as outlined in the WPS district calendar, which includes actually more than that. And it also references the part on absences for religious observations. It talks specifically about co-curricular activities, sports for religious observances. Some of these observances start the night before, and we want to make sure that it's very clear that these absences, that there is no, I hate the word punishment, but no unintended consequence for them, like you didn't practice, so then you can't play in the game on Saturday. That certainly isn't appropriate. Or, you are involved in the theater program, there's the rehearsal, that no one, all these absences should be excused. They're not up for objection. Then we have a whole list of recognition of religious holidays based on specific points that go through, just again, to provide more clarification. There was not this amount of clarification in the old policy, and we thought that this was important to move forward. If anyone has any points they want to discuss or comment, we can certainly talk about it now.
Any comments, questions? Thanks, Lisa. Let's move on to the next. It's a discussion of ceremonies and observances.
That's all part of it. That's the same one.
Oh, apologies.
Yeah, it's all the same one. It's written a little bit oddly, but it's the same one. The next one we have to look at is the FAFSA policy, the free application for federal student aid. I don't know if anyone has any questions on that. Basically, what it is it's is about the state of Connecticut. This is something that the state of Connecticut wishes for us to do. And the idea is by doing this, reporting out on the FAFSA. I mean, frankly, here in Weston, the percentage rate of students that apply for the FAFSA, what they're trying to do is to promote students to apply to college. And they see the FAFSA as one of the pieces that promotes that. As you know, here in Weston, we have like a 97% rate of students going to college. So we certainly want to comply with the state regulation, and that's in this policy. However, we're not really worried about our particular college application rates. We have been complying with this, providing programs. The director of school counseling, in her review, she speaks about that there are specific programs geared to financial aid in the FAFSA that our guidance department provides. Any questions or discussion on that policy? Okay, moving right along. Oh, I'm sorry. Did someone?
No.
Oh, okay. I thought I was looking down to, I don't want to make sure everything's okay. Student discipline policy. This is a very thick policy, and there are regulations. We think this policy is important to review frequently. And if you go and you can see how many times it's reviewed in the last several years, it was revised in 2016, 2019, 2021. We reviewed it again in 2022. This is also the practice of our administrative team, where we go through, we have new administrators joining the district. We want to make sure everyone is very clear about the student discipline policy and the regulations regarding that. It's extensive. We do, rest assured, follow it. We look at it. I see the principals nodding. Anytime there's a disciplinary situation, we look very carefully to make sure that we follow this. And then there are also administrative regulations regarding expelled students that, again, we follow very, very carefully. So we did bring it forward again. There are a few under the regulations. This, you can see it says shipment on the top. And we want to make sure that, again, we are using the best, having the best possible regulations, and that we reflect our practices regarding this really important policy. It's probably one of the most frequently used policies that we have. Not that we have a lot of discipline incidents, it's just important. Any questions on this policy?
I have a couple of questions.
Sure, and I invite anyone else, perhaps Tracy or Gina, to help answer. But go ahead, David. Sure.
I just, I did review the policy. It's long, but it's worth looking because it is, I think, referred to pretty often.
Yes.
It doesn't seem like in the policy there's a lot of room for an administrator or principal, whoever's actually going to look at the policy, to use judgment or to I don't know what the right word is.
Mitigate a disciplinary
more like
consequence.
Yeah, or more like look at the overall what happened and to what extent do I have to follow this policy, for example, expulsion and school suspension, versus using, potentially knowledge about the situation, knowledge about the student, and other factors. I can't think of what the right word. I'm looking for a specific word. I apologize. I've lost the word, but it'll come to me probably. But it just seems like the policy doesn't leave a lot of room for. I would presume the principals are probably the ones that refer to it the most. It seems very. This is what the policy says, and this is what I must follow.
I can comment first on that, and then I would open it up to the principal. So if, for example, you look on page 4 of the policy, it says under Roman numeral 3, actions leading to disciplinary action, including removal from class, suspension, and or expulsion. Right there is some deference to the administering the policy. For example, you look at something like theft and you say, what did someone steal? There's, again, that person is not necessarily expelled. So I think that there is some discretion with the administrators. I'll let them
That's the word.
comment.
That's the word I was looking for,
Discretion.
discretion.
Yes. However, there are other certain situations where, I'm sorry, there's not. You bring drugs to school and this is what's going to happen. Or for example, oftentimes if there's a fight or a physical altercation, and I've been doing this a long time, 38 years, you hear something like, well, my child was defending himself or herself. We understand that doesn't mean you can put your hands on another person. It may mean that within the disciplinary consequence, one person receives more days of a suspension than the other. And sometimes it gets very frustrating because we protect students' rights and we don't discuss the other students' punishment. And there's a lot of, let's say, conjecture about a particular situation or what could happen or what couldn't happen. But I will say that, there are certain things that, for example, you bring a particular kind of gun and you're on school road and school is closed, but it's a particular kind of gun. It doesn't matter. This is our campus. We are, free of firearms. So I guess I would say there is some room of discretion with certain things that our administrators do consider. Sometimes the age of the student comes into factor. If you're talking about, for example, a 10-year-old versus a 16-year-old, and it factors into perhaps the number of days or the type of consequence. We really try to do a lot of in-school suspensions because, again, the state of Connecticut, rightfully so, it's better for them to be in school where they can get counseling, where the teachers can check on their work, all of that. So I do think that there is, where appropriate, administrative discretion, and know that if it's a serious situation, our administrators know to call central office and we have a conversation and we review the situation and where necessary, we collaborate over the consequence. Mr. Doak, it looked like you wanted to say something. Feel free.
I was just going to say that you basically said it well, Lisa, but I thought you were looking for the word restorative practices, which is a word that's used a lot in discipline, especially at the middle school level. So you have these disciplinary situations that the policy allows us to discipline, like Lisa said, up to and including expulsion. But there's a lot of education also that takes place as part of the consequence. And as Lisa said, counseling is also a big part of consequences.
Any other administrator wish to offer a comment? One of the other things I would say is when you talk about things like hazing, when you talk about things like hostile learning environment, we take very seriously. And so sometimes the situation happens, someone says, oh, well, that happened off school grounds. The school shouldn't get involved. Believe me, we know our boundaries, and I would like nothing better than for us not to have to get involved. However, when you have a child that does not feel comfortable sitting in a class and is being, picked on, made fun of, shunned, something because of a situation that happened outside of school, and that child cannot access his or her education in the classroom, then unfortunately it does become our concern. So, up to and including suspension and expulsion is the discretionary piece, I guess I would say. And then there are very specific things, as you can see and hear, about students that perhaps have need an independent learning plan, students with an IEP, all of that.
Let me add. So I guess overall, there's one other thing I wanted to ask, and then I just kind of want to give it as my overall take. There doesn't appear to be an appeal process. I did see for expulsions, there's three members of the board, but there doesn't appear to be an appeals process. Is that an oversight or that's intentional?
No, that's accurate. So this is what happens. If someone, for example, is suspended from school, before they're suspended from school, we take very seriously their due process, and the parent, the child come in, they talk. Mr. Dope suspends someone, usually in consultation with us, depending on the serious nature. Sometimes if it's not as serious, it's usually after we get records of all the suspensions. If we have to work through the situation, we work through it together, and the suspension is final. Now, with regards to expulsion, what the board has agreed on is that if someone is going to be expelled, that the board defers to an independent hearing officer, which I think is a very important practice. And what that practice is that there's a hearing, and the independent hearing officer comes, and the family is there, and the administrators are there, and he acts on behalf of the board, and he or she, it's been a he, Steve Sedor for a long time, makes a decision based on the information. That's when we move toward expulsion. Now, sometimes before the hearing officer, before the hearing, we do what's called as a stipulated agreement, where both parties come to an agreement about how we think that we can move forward with this expulsion. Perhaps it's in the number of days or what the student needs, something like that. But the hearing officer still comes, reviews it all to make sure that everyone is in agreement, that no one has been, strong-armed into agreeing to something. And then right there, we move forward with the stipulated agreement. But you're correct in your interpretation that, for example, if, Megan Ward, the principal of the high school, suspends someone and I'm in agreement, the parents can't say, well, I want a meeting with the superintendent. I want this, I want it rescinded, or I'm going to the board. I want it rescinded. It doesn't work that way. There are no appeals to central office.
I mean, I can just kind of classify my overall concern. And even before I was on the Board of Ed, I kind of watched this policy, and I always was a bit concerned with it. I feel like there's two things with this policy, is that number one, there's really no appeal process except for expulsions. And how much does this policy allow for the fact that a lot of the middle schoolers in particular, maybe the ninth graders, they're very impulsive, right? And impulsive kids sometimes do things that they immediately regret. And it seems like this kind of policy leaves all of the judgment about the impulsiveness to the administration. And so I think I would just simply say, I'm not particularly happy there's no appeals process. Is this the way other districts and?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I would say to you, David, and I've heard all kinds of things. My son is a really great kid. He was impulsive, and he, I could give you examples. I'll use a simple one. And that's why he punched Dan DeVito. Okay, he's impulsive. He's a kid. Kids are, I'll be frank, kids are kids. And that's why it's so important the way in which the consequence is given, the follow-up to the family and the child with a reentry. I've been at more meetings to say, okay, I didn't mean to, I was impulsive, or I didn't do this. Oh, he's immature. Oh, he's young for his age. And he or she engaged in this action, and we can't have that. And better that they learn that here in our K-12 program than before they go out beyond here, and then there are other problems. I mean, I think that it's important. Sometimes people get nervous, like, well, what happens to this suspension letter? You're going to send it with my college application. We don't do that. Okay, we work with individual families. We do not provide that documentation to colleges. There is a reality, though, that it's a very slippery slope to be able to say, well, this kid is immature and he's 10. This one is almost 11 and he was a little bit impulsive. Oh, this one never has gotten in trouble before. Sometimes it's just rules are rules. And what happens with the consequence is mitigated, if you will, and that there is where we can take certain consequences into consideration. However, there are consequences. And I think it's important that children learn that.
Yeah, I mean, my overall, I just think this policy is very broad, and
Mhm.
it is entirely at the discretion of the administration, who I don't have any issue with any of the administrators. I just feel like there isn't an appeals process. There isn't parent involvement, and you're saying it's by design. I just,
Well, there is parent involvement. Parents come and they're part of the due process with the students. There are meetings with parents. Parents are brought into the process. I don't want you to think that they're not. I mean, we had a situation today where people were on the phone with the parent about 4 times over the course of the day dealing with a situation. And the result is that doesn't change the disciplinary consequence. So, I mean, I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on this. This is
Lisa, I'll just add that I think the relationship piece of all of this and student discipline is always paramount to the consequence, right? So Dan used the word restorative before. You can have a consequence and have a restorative process. So we're on the phone with families, as Lisa just said, whether it's a reentry meeting or just walking through. Often I historically have liked to have the student tell the parent what the student did, kind of got them in a little bit of hot water. So I think that we could really get bogged down in appeals too, with suspensions and detentions and every disciplinary consequence that we might have to enact in the schools. And I, for the sake of our schools and kind of the order of the schools, it's just really important that a wrong happened. We're going to correct the wrong. The consequence helps support the correction, and all along the kids are supported, whether it's, in school or whatever, they're supported as they carry out that consequence as well.
The other thing that's important to note is part of the practice is, for example, let's say a youngster does something and she needs to go home. Like, we know that this isn't good. She's going to be suspended, but the most important thing is she needs to be picked up. We need to meet with the parent and she needs to go home. At that point, on many occasions, we don't just say, okay, Patty is suspended for 4 days. She can come in for 2, or she's out for 2, then she comes in for 4. We may say, Mrs. Falber, you need to take your daughter home. We will be in touch a little bit later with you. Then there's a conversation again with the parent and that. And so it can come even a little bit later when we finally say, okay, this is the consequence after we've looked it all over. But there have been situations like that where that it's not immediately decided for the very reason that we need to be thoughtful about this. And then we also need to share what our plan is. I mean, the piece of having them in school, meeting with counselor, social worker, school psychologist, teachers, all of that takes place during the suspension, and it's really critical.
David, you have more?
I just going to say, so to sum it up, there is discretion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it sounds like maybe up until, but not through expulsion, because expulsion has its own process with the board. So up until you hit potentially an expulsion, there is discretion. Yeah.
There's I'm sorry, there's also discretion with the expulsion. Remember, you can get a stipulated agreement. There are expulsions, but also the length of the expulsion, all of that can also be discussed in certain situations.
Okay. And the discretion that can take place, the discretion can take place after the administrator has spoken to the parent or parents.
Yes.
Okay. I just look at policies like this and I get so concerned that they're so not vague, but so much can fall into it that I just like the reassurance that ultimately there is discretion and some level of parent involvement before a determination is made.
There definitely has to be, and quite frankly, that's one of the strengths of this district. We are a small district. We know our students. We reach out, and it's really important. When a child gets suspended, for example, it can be very traumatic and upsetting for both the child and the parent. And our responsibility is to work through that with them. And it takes, sometimes takes a great deal of time over several days, whatever it is, but we're committed to doing it. There are times where our school resource officers also help in that situation, especially if it's involving something with, you know, the internet or something like that. They are great. They are great supports to sit down and talk with the student. And the most important message we always give every student is, you're back. You know, these are the people you need to talk to if you're struggling. We are here for you. You know, no one is a bad child. Sometimes they make poor decisions. Sometimes they do things that are really not the best choice. And that's the most important thing. You know, we have good children here that have to learn from their mistakes. And we reiterate that. Every administrator, every school counselor, psychologist, social worker reiterates that. That's our expectation with this policy.
Just a question on timing. If it's determined that a child should be expelled and they're in the hearing process, what's the timing from that decision to when they actually have a hearing?
So you are suspended 10 days, and then at that point it goes to expulsion. And what happens is if we can't get the expulsion hearing officer, let's say there's a time lapse of a few days, we do ask the parent to keep the child home voluntarily. We make sure that the child has work and everything else. We put together this expulsion packet as quickly as possible. There are times where during that time the child is home, we are trying to come up with a stipulated agreement. Remember, you can expel up to 180 school days, up to. So an expulsion can be beyond the 10, it could be 20 days, it could be 30 days, it could be the 180 days. And that's where sometimes in a stipulated agreement, we say, you know, we are going to keep you out of school for this amount of time, even though we could keep you out longer. And you can come back and you have to meet the following, you have the following responsibilities. And if you do not follow or adhere to these guidelines, then you're going to be out longer. And many times the stipulated agreement works, where it cuts the time that we're expelling the child, and the child knows that, and very clearly that what the child needs to do, like, you know, no other disciplinary incidents, not cutting class, that kind of stuff.
Thank you.
Sure.
Other questions?
Yeah, this is both a suggestion and then a question. A suggestion might be that part of, I think, maybe what David is talking about too is the document reads pretty broad, because under this one title of 3, you've got all possibilities range from like removal of class all the way to expulsion. And then all the numbered items below, they're a little bit, they're pretty broad. So even within one category, you might vary, you know, like item 5 goes from refusal to obey a law enforcement authority or disruptive classroom behavior. So some of these numbers sort of lump a lot of things together. May be useful to parse these out even more so it feels a little more thematically consistent. But that's a suggestion. But what that leads me into a question is, I'm just curious if there's a way to get some, for people who are enforcing this framework, is there a way to get some transparency into kind of like a ranking or a level of which activity would be commensurate with which punishment or sort of result? That would be the question.
So if you look, for example, at page 9, discretionary and mandatory expulsions, and you talk about possession of a firearm, that kind of stuff, you're going to be expelled for that. Okay,
Sure.
that says discretionary and mandatory. Must recommend expulsion. There's may and there's must, and the language is particular. This policy and the way it was designed, and I hear what you're saying, it's a very dense policy. This is how Shipman and Goodman in that service kind of put it together, if you will, and they are sort of the guru policy drafters for many districts in the state. It is a very dense policy. And, you know, I can't tell you how many times it's online, something happens and it's the reading of the policy and seeing how it applies, that parents are aware of the student discipline, policy in general, and it isn't until something happens that then they go through and they see the depth of the policy. But the difference is in the must and the may. I mean, there are certain things where you have to expel. And if anyone has a question, I mean, I'm very fortunate in that we have principals that have been doing this a long time. Megan is our newest principal, but certainly not new to the position. Tracy Edwards, the pupil services director, and Tina also, get a call if there's plenty of people to kind of help, because sometimes there are situations where, you just want to be sure. But it's, all I can say is it's written this way for a reason. And that the lawyers recommend it's written this way, but you're right, it goes through so many different scenarios. That's why it's reviewed. You have walkouts, you have things like inappropriate display of public affection. What could that be? I mean, I would walk up to someone and say, knock it off. We don't do that here, and you move on. But it's written that way in case it goes to a higher, who knows what level that could actually happen. So, or things like dress code. Dress code is sort of the bane of some of our existence. We see students dressed in a way that I wouldn't necessarily want them to go to school, and they're being dropped off by parents, to be perfectly frank. Like, we don't need to see stomachs. And so we're not going to suspend or expel someone like that, but we're going to go up and say, could you please put a sweater on? So I do think that the people, the administrators that have to work the policy and administer the policy have a good handle on it. I don't know if any of you want to comment on that.
Add a little something.
Sure.
Lisa, can I just add to that? So just to emphasize what Lisa was referring to, there is some flexibility in it, and it's a little maybe broad from an outside view, but that's because it sometimes depends too on the severity or the frequency of behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference between, I elbowed somebody on purpose versus, I knocked them to the ground. So when you see physical, something under the physical part of it, there's different degrees of that. And that's where the flexibility really comes in to play.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks.
Just on that comment too, if you're going through and a new situation comes up that you hadn't anticipated and it changes the policy, that's something that can be revised as well, right? Because you said the policy is constantly ongoing. So as time evolves, new situations come up, we're pretty quick to be able to adjust and revisit the policy.
Which is important because, you see all this list and part of me thinks, well, there's probably other things that who knows what the future is going to bring that we can miss. That's why it's important. Every year, the administrative team goes through this policy because every year we have different variations of incidents. I think the important thing is here is, hey, we do not want to suspend or discipline, expel. We don't want to. Unfortunately, there are times where it's necessary, and we need to make sure, like if some new bizarre situation happened, I know the principals would be right on the phone calling us. And if I need to make a call to one of my superintendent colleagues or to our legal counsel, I will, because no one wants to do anything that would jeopardize, a student in our system.
Lisa, can I ask one more question?
Sure.
So I was flipping through some of the highlights I made, and you said that there is consultation with the parent doesn't necessarily change the outcome, but there's at least consultation. But when I look at, for example, on page 11, item 5, and then item 6, it's unless it's someplace else in the document, my interpretation is a child can be removed from a class or could be suspended. It makes no mention of speaking with the parent. And at best, it says that the parent or guardian will be notified within 24 hours.
Yes.
So it sounds.
Well, removal of class, for example, we could have a situation where a kid was disrupted and he was removed from class. Removal from class could be, he was pulled out and was, a third grader and he was down in the main office for 45 minutes. and the parent, it's very important that if a child misses instruction, the parent be told. Now, if Patty has someone, I've seen it happen, somebody comes down and, you know, a little, I don't know, third or fourth graders in the main office because he or she was being disruptive in class. Patty, talk us through what you would do. What does that mean when we talk about giving notice to parents?
Well, whenever a student is down in my office, I mean, I try to make sure I call parents as soon as possible. If it's and even at the end of the day, I try. If not, I'll leave a message and then we talk it the next morning. But I always try to make sure that parents understand what happened, that they were down with me, what we talked about, and then obviously I help, you know, to be a partner in with parents in talking through the behavior. So
something like that wouldn't be necessarily a formal disciplinary action,
No.
David, but a parent needs to know, like if his or her child was a little bit disruptive in class and was sent to the office. That's an example of that when it talks about given notice. If there was something of a nature where someone was going to be suspended, there's a lot more conversation than if someone was, you know, pulled out of class. Look, we had this issue. It could be in the cafeteria at the middle school. And Mr. Doak might say, you know what, you need to come down and stay here for half an hour, calm down, have your lunch, whatever. And he would follow up with a call. It's those kinds of things under 5C that we're talking about.
So is that something, for example, under 6 with the suspension? I understand what you're saying about the removal from class, and of course
Sure,
that
yeah.
makes sense. But under suspension, 6, it says item number 4 that item number 4 is essentially the first time a parent is mentioned, and it says the parent will be notified after or following the suspension.
By telephone, the principal or designee shall make reasonable attempts to immediately notify the parent or guardian of a minor student following the suspension and to state the words. That piece right there, and then it talks about forwarding a letter. That piece right there, I understand what you're saying. Our practice is to discuss the suspension. So I think that I'm going to mark this piece here because I see what you're saying, David. And perhaps we can look at rewording that a little bit clearer to make it reflect our practice, because people aren't just notified, they're told.
Yeah.
There has to be discussion. Yeah.
I'm looking at this document from both sides, right? It has to be comprehensive for the district to say, this is how we enforce it, this is why we enforce it, and this is where you can look. And conversely, amongst us and the public right now, we're saying there's an opportunity for the parent to be consulted before the suspension is handed down, but in fact, it's not written. So, it should balance each other out. I think
I understand. And this is why we have these discussions, quite frankly, in the first read. I'm glad it's a first read. I've made a note. I appreciate your feedback on that. We never tell parents. We always engage. I mean, you may end up saying this is what's going to happen, but there always has to be a component of a discussion or conversation. So I will look at that wording a little bit more closely. Okay.
Thank you.
I've made a note. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Do we on to the next, Lisa?
Sure. Where are we?
Visitors and observations.
Oh, okay. Visitors and observations. Sorry. Oh, here it is. Okay. So this is been revised in 2022. We looked again very carefully at this policy, and it talks about, as I said, visitors to the school as well as observations to the school. And basically it puts up some parameters around the idea of someone coming in and observing a class. And I think that one of the most important piece here is when you look through it, it says the building principal is the one that makes the decision, because a parent or an outside provider may need to, may request observing a class. And there's different things that have to be considered, different factors. who's in the class, the length of the observation, what is the purpose of the observation? Because sometimes the purpose, they may need something, we can fulfill that purpose of what they need, not through an observation, if you will. So this puts up the parameters, and there's also at the very end of it, a request for a classroom observation. It talks about how the observation would take place upon arrival, and et cetera, et cetera. And I know that there have been a couple of requests like this that have used this new format. We kind of tried it out. I know, for example, there was one at Laura Caddis's building. I think all of this is important because it sort of sets up a protocol that we think is important regarding these kinds of observations and visitors. As you can see, it hasn't been revised in quite a while, almost 10 years.
Questions, comments? Let's move on to old business.
Oh, more policies. Okay. This is the second read of emergency action plan for interscholastic and intramural athletic events. I don't know if anyone had any further questions. This is another one of these policies that we had these practices, but we needed to codify it in a specific policy.
Are we skipping over or going back to?
Right.
Yeah.
We skipped over the first one on
Oh, I'm
recruiters.
sorry.
That's all right. We'll go back to that. Are there questions on the emergency action plan for sports, interscholastic and intramural athletic events? Can I have a motion? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the new policy? Series 4000 personnel emergency action plan for interscholastics and intramural athletic events.
Move that the Weston Board of Education approve the new policy series 4000 personnel emergency action plan for interscholastic and intramural athletic events.
Is there a second?
I second.
Great, thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Can we go back to the uniform treatment of
Sure.
recruiters, Lisa?
Sorry, I missed it at the hard copy. It's the last line. This is again the second read, and this was pretty much our practice, but it's important that we specify this and put it to be, to be following the law. Are there any questions or discussion on this? This is the second read.
Seeing none, can I have someone move to approve the new policy series 2000 administration uniform treatment of recruiters?
Move that the Weston Board of Education approve the new policy series 2000 administration uniform treatment of recruiters.
We have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Raise your hand. Aye. Anyone opposed? That passes. Lisa, we move on to the superintendent's report.
Did we do the external heat?
External heat.
No, we have to do that one.
External heat illness awareness for intramural and interscholastic.
Oh,
athletes. Sorry. It's kind of,
yeah, no, that's my mistake. Go ahead.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, no worries. This again is a second read.
Any questions or comments? May I have a motion to approve the new policy series 4000 personnel external heat illness awareness for intramural and interscholastic athletes?
Move that the Weston Board of Education approve the new policy series 4000 personnel exertional heat illness awareness for intramural and interscholastic athletes.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, now we can move on to the superintendent report.
Okay, superintendent's report will be brief. Well, we are winding down before the holiday break. There's been some wonderful concerts and programs. Is it tomorrow is the X period, Megan? Tomorrow? Is that what Josh said? That's very exciting. I see that there's like sing-alongs at the Whist during the day and all kinds of concerts that took place this week. So it's so great to be sort of back to, you know, the way we were pre-pandemic, and to give our students, you know, that was also one of our goals this year, district goals, to give them opportunities to perform. They performed at the tree lighting ceremony, which was wonderful. Peter Gordon was there helping videotape so we could post on Instagram at that. So it's really been, it's just been, I have to say, delightful to be able to participate in these community events. The administrative team is working diligently on the budget. We have spent a great deal of time analyzing student performance data, looking at staffing, trying to approach everything through what I call the academic return on investment, to make sure that we can provide what all of our students need, and to be able to do it at scale. So more to follow. We will be presenting that the week we get back. And Mr. Cross has been doing heavy lifting on that, getting the budget ready. And I want to take an opportunity, as always, to thank everybody on the team that has been helping with this, the administrators in the building level and as well on central office. And I think, we will be sending out our district update later this week. And in the district update and all of the school updates, it's jam-packed full of things. I'm putting in a shameless plug for my new What's Up in the Weston Public Schools podcast, where we talk to Ms. Reines, the WIS librarian. Teacher librarian is what she calls herself, and it's a great podcast. We also have links. Sometimes over the holidays, people have a little bit more time during the break, and there are links to a variety of programs that took place this fall. And I would encourage you to, if you didn't hear Matt Bellis in ADAP, or if you would like to listen to the presentations given by the school resource officers at the high school, and there are more presentations that are going to be taking place in January and February. In February, Mr. Dan DeVito is going to be working on a presentation specifically for parents, designed on the whole idea of social media, digital citizenship, and everything like that. When he told me that he had given these presentations in his prior districts, well, we just jumped right on it, and we're very happy to report that he will be speaking to parents on that. He's quite an expert in that area, so we're very grateful. And I think that's about it. I think we can go right to the committee reports.
Great. Communications Committee. I know Sharon's not here today.
Sharon, in all fairness, has had some terrible time with something getting in. I didn't notice the message from her on my phone.
She's hopping in now.
Is she in now? Oh, there she is.
She reached out to her communications committee buddy.
Yeah, I've reached out to
Sharon.
everyone. I reached out to Melissa. I reached out to David. I reached out to Bernadette. I had on my calendar, it was 7 o'clock. So June sent something out today that had both 7 o'clock and 6 o'clock. I thought the 6 o'clock was an oversight. So my apologies.
Well, welcome to the meeting.
Gee, thanks.
We appointed you to a few boards that
Yeah.
we'll tell you about later.
Great. All right. Sorry.
But you
I
did
would've
pick
been here
perfect
at
timing.
6. I was killing time waiting for my meeting. I'm annoyed. All right, go ahead.
So communications committee, we don't have too much to report on. When we met last in November, actually, I guess we met December, but it's all blur. We're working on a new website. Dan's really working on it. We're just giving him feedback. Dan, do we have a go live date still?
We do not, but it's sometime in January.
That's the report from the Communication Committee.
Questions? Move on to the Curriculum Committee.
Sure. At our meeting, we discussed a detailed update on the elementary literacy program and timelines for implementing changes. So if you want details on where we are in that process, you can just check out our meeting recording from December 13th.
Okay. Questions? Finance and Operations, we did not meet. People were traveling, and we will take that up at our meeting in January. And Policy. Same was true of the Policy Committee. People were traveling, and we didn't have a full quorum, if I remember correctly.
No, I think we actually met. The policy committee met. And
I'm getting him confused with finance. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We met.
Yeah, we met. Yeah.
And we
Melissa's the
reviewed all
chair.
those policies.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
essentially.
First reads.
Yep.
And then lastly, the Negotiations Committee, we do have a negotiation coming up with the ASME union. First meeting, I believe, is in mid-January, the 18th or 19th, if I remember correctly.
19.
And then CES.
So I'll just briefly say, for those that don't know what CES is, it's Cooperative Education Services. I can define it simply as we're a whole bunch of superintendents, assistant superintendents, and board people like me get to go about, I think, once a month, meet with other like-minded people from other districts in our Durham, actually not our Durham area, but more in our county, and kind of share what's going on. And Lisa can speak to the great meeting we had a couple weeks ago at CES.
It was a great meeting. We put a picture of ourselves on Instagram. It was great to have the members of the legislature there with the superintendents to discuss things and where we need their help, and some of the challenges that we have, especially with unfunded mandates and things about burden of proof regarding due process. Connecticut is one of 5 states where the district has the burden of proof, and so it was an interesting conversation.
Yeah, if I can just chime in, that's the first one I've attended. I found it very interesting. You had school districts beginning in Greenwich, going, right up the coast to Bridgeport and in between, and Shelton, and it was very informative about how each school district looks at a number of situations that are driven by the legislature primarily. And our representatives were there, our new state senator, our House representative, and there were similar representatives in the other districts in the county. So it was quite informative.
And just to set expectations straight, that only happens once a year. The other 8 or 9 meetings a year are much more laid back, but it's other board members, principals, superintendents, just like-minded, talking about what's happening in their district.
That's great. It was a lively discussion. CABE?
No updates, but just if anybody's curious, the CABE stands for the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education. And if there's big news that comes out across the Board of Educations, they disseminate that information to all of the school board members.
And the Weston Education Foundation?
Not much. They haven't met recently. Not much of an update aside from they had their fundraiser. The Harlem Wizards, I think it was, that played, and it was very successful. They were very happy, and we'll be meeting again shortly. They're currently in the process of putting together some some scholarships and some awards for the high school students. So all good.
Yeah. And they've sent out a year-end donation request.
Yep. They sure have. So
Terrific. Thank you. Someone chiming in or? So we have some upcoming meetings on the budget. January is a very busy month. You can see them, that we have a meeting on the 5th and then our normal meeting on the 17th and there are meetings in between. So I would encourage everyone to take a look at that and carve a couple weeks out of your schedule to go through the budget, because I know Phil's been working diligently on it. Are there any additional agenda items for the next meeting that anyone sees? Peter?
Yeah, I think we'll
yes.
give an EOC update in the next meeting.
Yeah, thanks for doing that. We had an organization meeting, the first organization meeting for the establishment of the Educational Optimization Committee, members getting to know each other. Importantly, and Peter, you and Dan should chime in on this, about the email address that you've created for all communications between members and interested parties.
Yeah, as an engineer, of course, we do our calculations on back of envelopes. So there's the email address that Dan set up for all stakeholders. We welcome and encourage all constructive inputs, but this, I think, will be officially set on the school district website. So maybe with a click, they can just send their email. But we'll give a little more meat on the bones when we meet next month in our regular meeting.
Great, thank you. I think that's it. I think I jumped the gun the last meeting to wish everyone a happy holiday, but I don't think I'm jumping the gun now. So I do hope everyone has, just a terrific holiday season and a really great New Year's.
Great.
Have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
You have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Certainly, I don't think anyone's opposed.
My apologies about being late, guys. Sorry about that.
No worries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Happy holidays, everyone.